Most people, I'd say probably half the people, or probably a little bit more than that, maybe 60% or so of the people who come to adoption are coming to us because of issues of infertility, whether it's primary infertility and they don't have any children, or secondary infertility. It's not so unusual for people to have a child and then not be able to have a second child or third child. So people sometimes are coming to us to start a family and sometimes to add to their family. There are people who choose adoption simply because they know that there are millions, really, literally millions of children in the world who don't have parents. It can run from $15,000 up to $30,000 and even more than that in some cases. Because not only are parents paying for all this work, they also have to, in most cases, travel to another country, and in some cases make 2 or 3 trips to that country because the country requires it. We tell people from the outset that there are many ups and downs in adoption, that the likelihood is that their process may not go totally smoothly because we're dealing with lots of unknowns, and we jokingly say adoption is like an emotional roller coaster ride, because the fact of the matter is that people go into this with expectations based on the experience of other people who have been through the process, and on our expectations based on what we have had happen to other families in the past year. But we also know that changes can and do happen very quickly. Adoption is on the reduction for the first time in a long time. For the past 25 to 30 years, adoptions have, until fairly recently, adoptions have been growing every year, especially since the advent of international adoptions. About 3 years ago, things started gradually shifting. For different reasons, because different reasons being that each country started to look at what their work was and the impact on children, and started to have different ways of handling things. Many countries decided that they were now in an economic position to be able to keep the children in their own borders, which is always a good thing. It's not that that's not a good thing. It's always good for a child, if possible, to be raised in their own culture. Is a decision that was made by countries around the world that did international adoption work to try to put in place a convention that would protect the rights of children, which is, of course, is a very, very important and good thing. Unfortunately, however, part of the fallout from the Hague Convention is that many countries don't meet the requirements in order to be a member of this Hague Treaty. And so international adoptions has actually been dramatically affected in many countries who have had to stop their adoption processes. I think that in general, the adoption, especially international adoptions, is going to be drastically reduced over the next 5 years. At some point it will probably level off to a still an ongoing but much smaller number of children who are being placed for adoption, because most countries really want to try to keep children within their own borders. And if they can find families, and many of the countries that previously were not able to do this are doing this now. China, for example, is now placing more than 3 times as many children in China as they are sending abroad. Well, the country probably at this point where you can adopt a child most quickly is Ethiopia. And we have a lot of parents who are, in fact, coming to our program in Ethiopia. And then what happens is the wait becomes longer, because a lot of those parents, prospective parents, want a child who's very young. Mm-hmm. So anyone who comes to us who's open to an older child, generally the wait may be anywhere from 4 to 6 or 8 months at the most for an older child, older being a child, let's say 4 and older. But for anyone who really has their heart set, and their mindset on adopting a baby or a toddler-age child, the wait could easily be about a year to a year and a half now. And we'll see what the future brings.